With rumors of our favorite sarcastic blue cat making a comeback soon, we've decided it's time to visit the town of Elmore to see how all the residents stack up when it comes to morality. This is the Amazing World of Gumball characters, good to evil. With the intro out of the way, let's start with the category that has a title that'd fit well in the show. These characters are the good. This time around, after some deliberation, we've decided that Alan Keen deserves the gold medal of good. Before anyone points it out, yes, I remember the vision. In this episode, it's revealed that Alan has a bit of a concerning manifesto, wanting to seize power at Elmore Junior High to eventually eliminate all sadness in the world. His methods were pretty ruthless, but he still ultimately had good intentions to make the world a better, happier place. The reason we still give Alan the gold medal of good is the episode The Faith. Here, Alan finally loses his hope in the world, and as a result, it loses all of its color. It's also revealed that Alan single-handedly covers a lot of the altruistic work done in and around Elmore. As Gumball puts it, Alan does the work to help others, so people like him don't have to. With that considered, any points Alan would lose for his admittedly questionable manifesto are immediately earned back by his genuine goodwill. He's the only person in Elmore who exudes enough goodwill to single-handedly keep the world from losing all of its positive vibes. If that's not enough, just consider how nice he is to Gumball. In the episode The Saint, Gumball spends the entire episode trying to make Alan lose his temper, failing at every turn. At the end, Alan straight up yells at Gumball on purpose just so he'll be happy, showing that he isn't just insanely nice, he's modest too. I'm not saying that dictatorships are ever a good idea, but if we absolutely had to have one, Alan would be a great candidate. On the topic of characters who carry the whole of Elmore on their backs, the silver medal of good goes to Larry Needlemeyer. A side character who's been around since the very first episode, Larry is famous for working every menial job in the town of Elmore. This often results in him being the butt of the joke when the citizens don't feel like respecting their food service workers. We see this in the episode The Pizza, where his frustration and quitting leads to the town falling into a state of apocalypse within a couple minutes. I don't think I'd call Larry a pinnacle of morality or anything, but like Alan, he's an honest and well-meaning guy that a lot of people rely on and lacks any of the major flaws most of Elmore's citizens have. Taking the bronze medal of good is Elmore Junior High's janitor and bus driver, Rocky Robinson. This mild-mannered Muppet is the son of the Wattersons' next-door neighbors, the Robinsons. With that in mind, it might be surprising that Rocky isn't a total jerk. On the contrary, Rocky is a pretty caring, friendly guy. He isn't perfect by any means, especially in regards to his lack of tactfulness when talking to women. He's not quite Professor Psychotic levels of delusional, but he's at least in the ballpark somewhere. Still, Rocky earns a lot of points by being one of the most modest, well-intentioned guys in the town. He's also super forgiving, considering the fact that he still loves his parents and even helps them out when the need arises, despite the fact that they openly consider him a disappointment. Rocky's one of those people who's not kind because it benefits him, but just because he wants to be. That's pretty admirable, and a ticket to a top 3 spot on our list. We're on our way to the next spot to talk about Darwin Watterson, Gumball's beloved guardian. Darwin is Gumball's ride-or-die partner in crime. Like, seriously, he uses Darwin as a vehicle sometimes. If Darwin has nothing else going for him, he has intense loyalty, to the point where his origin story is literally that he loved Gumball so much, he grew legs to reunite with him after accidentally getting flushed into the ocean. Darwin isn't just loyal to Gumball, though. He's kind to everyone around him, assuming the best in everybody until he has absolutely no hope of their goodwill. For every time this proves unsuccessful, like with Mrs. Robinson, there's another where he manages to make a somewhat decent connection, like in The Sucker, where he forms an unlikely friendship with Julius, one of the school bullies. This all makes Darwin one of the most kind-hearted, forgiving characters in the ensemble cast, but even he isn't without his faults. He can be mischievous at times, and while this is usually just him going along with Gumball's schemes, there are times where he's the ringleader. One example is the episode The Roots, where he pretends that he's homesick for the ocean to manipulate his parents into buying him a fancy new fish tank. But, like, come on, who among us didn't try to psychologically manipulate their parents into buying them trinkets as a kid? It's nostalgic, really, or maybe I'm just a psychopath, or both, who knows. On a less ambiguous note, there was that time where he got freaked out by his safety video so badly that he turned into Elmore's big brother of sorts, basically becoming a dictator for the sake of protecting the people. Like with Alan's manifesto, good intentions, really bad execution. That sort of thing is usually as bad as it gets with Darwin, though, and by Elmore's chaotic standards, that's pretty good. Wow, there are 2 dictators in the top 5, huh? Next, we have his bro. Wait, not that bro. I mean his bro-tato, Idaho. Don't worry, Gumball, we'll get to you later. This little guy is one of the more unproblematic students at Elmore Junior High. He's just a little potato with stick figure limbs and a smiley face, and as simple as that character design is, it perfectly encapsulates the simple country bumpkin lifestyle Idaho embodies. He's more than willing to share his lifestyle with others, but he doesn't force it on them. While he is easily influenced, for better or for worse, that's normal for a kid his age. Like a freshly baked potato, Idaho is warm and reliable. Just don't eat potatoes around him. Why? Did you really just ask that? Following Idaho, we have another sentient piece of food, Anton. Most of what we said about Idaho can apply to Anton too. He's a friend friendly, laid-back guy who keeps to himself. He also gets mutilated constantly, which leads to his parents remaking him as needed. That doesn't have much to do with his morality. What does, however, is his willingness to still be friends with Gumball and Darwin after they clone him behind his back. That shows some pretty good mercy on his part, and being able to forgive people for doing something that messed up is pretty admirable. If you think things are getting weird, you haven't met Sasa yet. If there's any character whose design encapsulates just how bizarre this series is, it's Sussy. Her skinny puppet limbs, her upside-down chin face, those iconic googly eyes. Sussy, in terms of both personality and design, is all about self-acceptance, no matter how weird it is. Sussy wears her heart on her little puppet sleeves, and it's a pretty good one. She likes just about everything and everyone, which means that I'm fairly certain she isn't even able to do anything bad. Gumball's shape-shifting girlfriend, Penny, is next. Nowhere near the usual stereotype for cheerleaders or crushes in cartoons, Penny isn't the least bit superficial. From her debut, she's consistently nice to the people around her, including Gumball, despite his blatantly obvious crush on her. Often, Gumball's feelings cause him to act in ridiculous ways around her, but she always seems to give him chance after chance, which shows that she's way more understanding than she needs to be. I mean, this dude literally poisoned her with a cupcake she was allergic to, and she still didn't abandon all hope for him. That's some serious dedication. Really, the worst we could say about Penny is that she goes on a rampage once she's finally able to come out of her shell, but that's really her father's fault for encouraging her to keep her true self hidden. This might actually be a bit of a surprise, but Richard Watterson is up next. I'd say it might be a surprise because there's frankly a case for the Watterson family's dad to get a whopping 3 Sinner medals. Like, seriously, I tried not to, but there's no way I can avoid giving any of these to Richard. He earns the Gluttony Sinner medal for his love of food, which even played into his workout regimen somehow, the Sloth Sinner medal for the fact that if he were to get a job, the fabric of the universe would literally unravel, and the Darwin Sinner medal because, come on guys, he tried to prank his kids by dropping a bucket of concrete on them, then showed genuine shock at the fact that it was dry. All of that is to say that Richard is a very flawed man, but if you look past all that, you have a man who actually makes for a pretty decent house husband. Richard was not raised by an ideal pair of parents, to say the least. His father abandoned him at a young age, and his mother babied him to the point where he became completely unable to function on his own. Despite this, Richard has shown time and time again that he'll do anything to protect his family, especially his kids. Whether he needs to break them out of a giant cargo crate, rescue them from a junkyard storm in the pouring rain, or even just stand up to a store's manager to get them the refund they rightfully deserve, Richard always puts his all into caring for his children. Like Darwin, he's also extremely forgiving and gentle, shown by the fact that his kids had to push him to stop getting absolutely bullied by Harold. In the end, there is no length Richard won't go to in order to help his family, whether it's cheering up Nicole when she's upset or protecting the kids when they're in trouble. He might be lazy, ignorant, and a downright danger to most of the town, but Richard has a big heart, which makes up for an even bigger stomach and a very, very, very small brain. Next up, a quick mention of Grandpa Louis Watterson is up next. You might know him as the guy who looks like what would happen if you threw an abstract mouse and a tripod camera in a blender, but in later seasons, Louis ends up marrying Granny JoJo and becomes the adoptive father of Richard and grandfather to his kids. He exhibits a pretty good relationship with the whole family, showing that he's a pretty cooperative and nice guy, especially given how rude Richard was to him on their first meeting. Next, we have Banana Joe, the class clown of Elmore Junior High. Rule 1 of interacting with Banana Joe: do not chew his pen. Rule 2, there are no rules. Sure, Banana Joe isn't the type of guy you'd go to if you want a sympathetic ear or some profound advice, but if you need a guy whose goal in like 90% of his interactions is to make you smile, he's your guy. Still, his jokes can be a little insensitive here and there. Making people laugh is great, but he might stand to learn that there's a time and a place for jokes and pranks. And after him, we have a dual entry for his parents, Banana Bob and Banana Barbara. Really, there's not too much to say about these two. More so than perhaps any other character, they make it clear that the banana didn't fall far from the bunch. These two love each other and their son, and aside from that, what more needs to be said? It's not like one of them is a prophet or anything, right? Next up, we have the school counselor, Mr. Small. His name may be small, but his impact is far from it. Whenever Mr. Small comes into the picture, you can be sure that some well-meaning and usually unhelpful advice or rituals will follow. While Mr. Small does his best to be an altruist, he sometimes does so to his own detriment. And there are times when he can be quite selfish. His worst appearance was probably in the episode The Sock, where after Gumball and Darwin cause various troubles throughout the school, he encourages them to be silent no matter what. I don't think I needed to spell this out, but that is one of the absolute worst things you could tell children as a school counselor. Nonetheless, he has a passion for helping people, and he's at least trying to be selfless most of the time. Sometimes he can be heroic, like when he helped Gumball and Darwin save Molly from the Void, which earns him some points for courage and general heroism. Next, we have the friendly immigrant from Jukeboxenberg, Juke. He's one of the quieter kids in Elmore, or at least one of the more unintelligible ones. In the boombox, it's revealed that he's only able to speak English when a switch on the back of his head is activated, which he can't reach by himself. Did this kid never think of trying to use a back scratcher? Up next, we have a quick mention of Molly. Known primarily for her long, boring, intricately detailed stories, Molly is a pretty nice student who struggles to make friends, as much as she tries to. Aside from her lack of interesting traits, Molly is a nice person and definitely the more pleasant of Elmore's dinosaurs. On another note, does anyone else find it weird that Molly, the character whose whole joke is being boring and irrelevant, has a last name name in the wiki. That's some dedication, I'll admit. Local hypochondriac Terry is next. Terry, like Molly, is a pretty flat character, but in a more literal sense. Of course, I'm obviously referring to the fact that she's mostly characterized by her intense fear of germs, resulting in her constantly cleaning or critiquing everything and everyone around her. Still, you can't fault her for being concerned for both her well-being and that of others, even if it is a little overbearing sometimes. Leonard Daniels takes one of the lower spots in our good category, but I'm sure he doesn't mind. In fact, he doesn't seem to mind much of anything, whether it's being commissioned to serve as a local rich guy, being abused with various forms of slapstick, or even offering to cut Gumball's brakes. Yeah, he's a weird guy, but he means well. We have to take some points away for his occasional stalker-ish tendencies, but like he'd say, it's only weird if you make it weird. Rounding out the good category, we have Carmen. During her time at Franklin Junior High, she was a short-tempered delinquent who engaged in a lot of problematic behavior. Perhaps the worst of all was making fun of her teacher, Mr. Blurry McBlurryface, or whatever his name was. Thankfully, when she was expelled and transferred to Elmore, Carmen worked hard to turn her life around, and although she can be smug about it, she does genuinely care about helping others improve their lives. But now it's time to move into the gray area, where the characters get a little more psychologically ambiguous. If that smug wiener dog face didn't give it away, first up is the youngest member of the Watterson family, Anais. It might be a bit shocking that she landed so low on our list, especially compared to where she was the first time we ranked this series as cast on morality. How did Anais drop all the way from the top 5 to the gray area? Well, let's start with her good traits. Despite all of her smugness, Anais is usually a caring person. She uses her unusually high intelligence to support her family however she can, and genuinely does enjoy spending time with them. She can come on a little strong, a lot strong with new friends, but she pretty much always means well. Certainly not a character who's out to hurt anyone anymore. Emphasis on anymore. The episode The Rival revealed that during her time as an infant, Anais literally attempted to murder her brothers, seemingly just for the sheer fun of it. We wouldn't see this as a true detriment to her morals, given that she was a literal baby, were it not for the fact that she's characterized by being ridiculously mature and intelligent for her age. Even at 4, she still has a mischievous streak. The episode The Remote sees her psychologically manipulate the whole family into staying at each other's throats for possession of the TV remote, to distract them from the fact that she herself had it, and was waiting for the perfect opportunity to use it. Anais isn't evil by any means, but she is ruthless, and given what she's done before, as a result, we can't place her any higher. Next, we have the embodiment of lawfulness in Elmore, the Donut Sheriff. I don't know what's funnier, the idea that this guy's name could literally be Donut Sheriff, or the idea that the creators gave Molly a name, but not this guy. In any case, this sheriff works to uphold the law in Elmore, whether it means teaching kids the importance of abiding by the law or helping lock up dangerous gas station robbers. He isn't the most outwardly friendly guy, nor is he particularly great at his job, but this pastry-esque policeman is a decent enough guy who's playing an important role in Elmore. But next is a character who can play just about any role, Clayton. One of the many classmates of Gumball and Darwin we'll be discussing today, Clayton is a little red shape-shifting ball of clay. His propensity for lying, and more concerningly, identity theft, is a rough spot on his record. His tendency to stretch the truth, or his own body, into something more interesting makes it hard for him to make friends. Still, Clayton is a good guy at the end of the day. While he has his flaws, he does actively show signs of working on them. Plus, in the episode The Anybody, he beats up an alligator to rescue Gumball, which obviously earns him a lot of points. Speaking of identity theft, wow, what a transition for a Gumball script. Next we have Bobbert. This little robot is one of Gumball and Darwin's closest friend, even though he admittedly didn't have the best first impression. In his first major appearance, the robot, he steals Gumball's identity with an absolute ingenious disguise and ultimately tries to straight up murder him. But after that, he gets reset by Gumball, so I guess that's all in the past, right? That's the thing with Bobbert. He is a robot, and while he's capable of doing evil, he's equally capable of doing good, or at least neutral. Last chance to look at me, Hector. Then again, I doubt you can see me from that high up anyway. Hector is an interesting character. I wouldn't call him a gentle giant. He's more like a lobotomized giant. Okay, maybe that's too extreme as well. My point is that as long as Hector isn't exposed to any excessive excitement, he's a pretty chill guy. It's just that if he experiences any strong emotions, he inevitably goes on a rampage that endangers the entire town. You know, just regular teenage angst issues and all that. Up next, we have Sarah, one of Gumball and Darwin's closest friends and an obsessive stalker. Cartoon Network definitely has a type, huh? Stalker stuff aside, Sarah isn't particularly malicious. She does genuinely care about Gumball and Darwin and wants to be friends with them. If it weren't for her creepy behaviors, from recording them while they sleep to forcing Elmore's citizens into ships, Death Note style, she'd probably end up pretty high on our list, but sadly, stalking is frowned upon by most of us here in the real world, even if in Elmore it's more like a casual inconvenience. When there are literal phantoms like Carrie on the scene, I guess you'll learn to stop sweating the small stuff. Is stalking small stuff? In any case, Carrie is similar to Bobbert in a moral sense, that is. She didn't have a good start in the series, possessing a Gumball so she could enjoy the mortal sensation of eating again, but this moderate slip up aside, Carrie is pretty chill. She has a healthy relationship with Darwin, is friendly with most of the other kids at school, and even helped Gumball make a love potion when she thought Darwin was in love with Terry, placing Darwin's happiness over her own feelings. Then again, as selfless as that was, I really don't know if we should give her points for helping brainwash someone. From one melancholic student to another, next up is Claire Cooper. This moody kid makes her first major appearance in The Others, where she basically serves as a parody of every pessimistic coming-of-age movie out there. While in a moral sense, Claire is pretty decent, given how she maintains decent, healthy friendships and isn't out to harm anyone, she also loses some points for just how darn negative she is. Like, it's okay to be sad, Claire, but like you said, it's not always a bad chew. Hot Dog Guy, bane of socially anxious people everywhere, is next. When this guy comes into the picture, you know he's got one goal and one goal only in mind: to make Gumball's social life as awkward as possible, albeit unintentionally. Here's a fun game. Show someone who's never seen an episode of Gumball this scene before anything else. Tell us how it went. But for now, just know that while Hot Dog Guy is one of the funniest gag characters, he's also pretty much completely average in every way except his sunglasses. Those sunglasses are pretty cool. Alright, anime fans. Levi Ackerman, Goku, All Might, Isaac Netero. What do all of these characters have in common? That's right, Nicole Watterson would absolutely demolish them. While she's a kind person at heart, Nicole earns the Rat Center Medal out of sheer respect. Admittedly, raising 3 kids and 1 husband on a ridiculously low salary can't be easy, but Nicole still tends to parent with fear more often than not. Heck, even in the very first episode, she returns Gumball's smack talk by punching a hole in the wall. She can also be overbearing and critical of her family, mainly in the episode The Fridge, where she chronicles all of their achievements throughout the week on a chart. Overall though, Nicole still comes across as a pretty good mother and wife. She sticks by her family no matter what, works incredibly hard to provide for them, and like Richard, she'll do anything to keep them safe from harm, even if that means melting a man's soul with her mind to get him to clean up her house. She's a ride or die for her family, but her anger issues still have to lose her a few points on the sheer principle that if she isn't on the verge of murdering her own family, she's on the verge of murdering someone else. Following Nicole is another mother, Mrs. Jotunheim. As far as witches go, Hector's mom is pretty chill. Sure, she might trick kids into doing chores for her, but she makes up for that by being a pretty good, albeit overprotective, mother to Hector. It can't be easy looking after a literal giant like Hector, much less considering that his mother is only 28, meaning that if Hector is Gumball's age, she's either a teen mom or she adopted Hector. With all that considered, she earns even more credit from us than she already had. Now, without further ado, it's time to talk about the main man himself, Gumball Watterson. As a morally ambiguous cat with a head that's almost as big as his ego, Gumball can play just about any role the episode needs him to. At times, he can be a self-absorbed, hypocritical jerk, like in The Potato, where he convinces his family to adopt Idaho's simple lifestyle, only to go behind all their backs at night. The guy is also guilty of some seriously horrific crimes. Like, seriously, it sounds like a joke, but look no further than the episode The Saint, where Gumball spends the entire episode tormenting Alan just to prove he isn't perfect. Gumball's insensitive, arrogant, and a legitimate danger to society, so why isn't he any lower? I'm really trying here, actually. I guess if nothing else, he usually shows some sense of goodwill at the end of the day. Take the episode The Faith, for instance. When Alan loses his hope for the world, Gumball, who absolutely hates him, puts that to the side for the sake of cheering him up. Even after Alan's hope is restored, he admits they can at least kinda be friends. And in the current newest episode, The Inquisition, he helps restore all the students at Elmore Junior High to their cartoony selves. Gumball at least occasionally comes across as a decent person, which saves him from a lower spot on our list. But if this kid weren't 12, he would be in jail for a long time. Like, seriously, the amount of homicides Gumball is likely guilty of is actually wild. Oh, and we have to give Gumball the Envy Sinner medal. The guy spent a whole episode trying to ice Leslie because he was jealous of his connection with Penny. You know, his cousin, Penny. In a funny turn of events, Leslie's up next. As Elmore Junior High's resident fashionista and borderline narcissist, Leslie tends to cling to the spotlight however he can. He's pretty friendly with most of the people around him, even if he does have a bit of a puffed up view of himself. At his worst, he's kind of a jerk. At his best, he's perfectly decent, which at this point on our list is quite the achievement. Up next is local elder Marvin Finkelheimer. Marvin is a pretty harmless guy. Really, he fits the average grumpy old man stereotype to a T. The worst we could attribute to him is his stubbornness, mostly seen in The Watch, where he makes Gumball and Darwin jump through hoops to get their father's watch back. Still, aside from that, he doesn't seem to have any outright terrible flaws, unless you count IRL catfishing. Check please. Chunking the deuce onto the next spot is Tobias Wilson. Tobias is one of those interesting jock characters who doesn't quite warrant being called a bully, but he's still nowhere near a saint. At the heart of his character is his desire to be accepted by his peers, which sometimes manifests in him showing an amount of confidence that only a main character could usually possess. Heck, in one episode he straight up loses his temper on Gumball and Darwin over the fact that he isn't the main character, earning him the Pride Sinner medal as a result. Speaking of Tobias' sense of entitlement, he can also be pretty obsessive when he wants something, or someone. When he decides he wants to be Gumball's best friend, he's willing to go on a Scott Pilgrim-style rampage to beat Gumball's other best friends so he can be the only one remaining. Even if this was all in his head, it's still pretty messed up, but in his defense, Tobias is just a kid, and it's not like he's ever out to actively hurt hurt anyone, but since he's mostly lacking positive traits, here he stays regardless. Seeing a character as young as Billy Parham so low on the list might be a surprise, but hear me out. While his upbringing is much to blame for his sense of entitlement, his mother is Felicity after all, Billy still handled his unreciprocated feelings towards Anais in the worst possible way, by bullying her relentlessly in return for her rejecting him. Way to uphold the negative stereotype Fireman Pete fans have, Billy. From one rich kid to another, next up is Masami. We discussed this hopelessly romantic cloud a little bit in our Gumball villains ranking, but for those who missed it, Masami is quite entitled, particularly when it comes to relationships. Let's not target that she emotionally manipulated Darwin into kissing her when he was clearly uncomfortable with the idea, nor that she turned into a literal hurricane when Alan rejected her in favor of Carmen. She isn't ranked any lower on the sole basis that she's just a kid and has been shown to just want to be treated as such, but like Tobias, we'll need to see more outwardly good traits before we place her any higher. Alright, how about we tackle some of Elmore Junior High's teachers, like Mr. Corney. Unlike Clayton, Mr. Corney doesn't really seem to learn from his habit of lying to appear more interesting. Heck, if anything, he does it in a much more dangerous capacity, lying about being a cage fighter solely so he can kiss the nurse. He may have lost that fight brutally too, but he won the Lust Center Medal, that's something, right? Aside from lying occasionally though, Mr. Corney seems like a pretty regular guy, and what do you mean he did 8 years of hard labor in prison? What did he do? Another faculty member, Coach Russo, is up next. The mother of Jamie, she takes on a coaching gig at Elmore Junior High to keep her daughter's brutal bullying in check. Coach tends to endanger her students with her intense training, which is most prominent in The Recipe, where she straight up watches one of her students disintegrate in the water for the sake of a swim safety lesson, seeming completely unbothered by it. Still, that incident aside, she is keeping Jamie from bullying other kids at school, and she does seem to be determined to teach the kids skills that will help them in the future. The head of the school, Principal Brown, is almost at the tail end of our gray area. Nigel here might be a devoted partner to Miss Simeon, but that doesn't make him less problematic as a person in general. Aside from his general incompetence and insensitivity, Principal Brown is a full-on fraud, as revealed in the fittingly titled episode, The Fraud. To cover this up, he's willing to go as far as attempting to blow up the entire school, showing a pretty twisted side to his character. The only thing keeping him from falling into the bad section is the fact that he does actually care about his students, to some degree, often going out of his way to help teach them valuable lessons or check up on them when he suspects something isn't right at home. The Wattersons' next-door neighbor, Mr. Gaylord Robinson, is next. On the grouchy neighbor scale, Mr. Robinson is somewhere between Squidward from SpongeBob and Mr. Big Head from Rocko's Modern Life. On one hand, the guy's a jerk, let's not beat around the bush. While he does love his wife, he's not above insulting her, or his son, for that matter. In general, Mr. Robinson is just an unpleasant guy, and he doesn't really have that many good traits that make up for his unsympathetic ones. There is one episode that keeps him in the gray area though, The Heart. When Gumball and Darwin stop talking to Mr. Robinson after hearing him trash talk them behind their backs, they abandon the friendship, prompting Mr. Robinson to actually try and regain their friendship. Mr. Robinson got arrested multiple times in pursuit of connecting with his underage neighbors, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that's the true mark of a great man. Jokes aside, that was a genuinely sweet episode. Granny JoJo marks the very end of the gray area. As mentioned briefly before, Granny JoJo's worst quality is her awful parenting of Richard. Her overprotectiveness led to Richard becoming the slothful, incompetent man he is today, and as we see in The Authority, if she had her way, the whole Watterson family would be that way. She actively kept her son in a constant state of man-childhood, and if that weren't bad enough, she exhibits a similar sense of control over her husband Louis, refusing to even let him make friends aside from her. For all her faults, she does genuinely love her family, and to an extent her actions are an attempt to keep them safe. It couldn't have been easy to raise Richard by herself either, so while I won't excuse her bad deeds, I will give her some understanding, keeping her just outside of our final category. It's finally time to talk about Elmore's most unsympathetic faces. These are the bad to evil. Starting off this category is Ocho. On the surface, Ocho might seem like he's being placed harshly. I mean, sure, he's got anger issues, but so do Nicole and Mr. Robinson. How come they got in the gray area, but Ocho didn't? Well, here's the thing. While Ocho is a kid and has shown some self-awareness of how strong he tends to come on, he's also one of the most impulsive and violent characters in the whole show. This kid is so easy to tick off, even his own alarm clocks fear him. The episode The Uncle also reveals that he's willing to literally traumatize his friends before he lets them into his inner circle. And that's not to mention the fact that he coldly admits to taking people's pets hostage. Still, despite all this, Ocho isn't outright evil. He's just an unstable kid who desperately needs therapy. Next we have Elmore's most prominent nerds, Colin and Felix. This pair of literal eggheads is probably known best for their role as the heads of the Reject Club, to which they invite any kid who's rejected from all other clubs. Unlike Bobbert and even Ocho, who were also in the club, these two never really got much of a sympathetic story, tending to insult everyone around them for no reason but a smug sense of superiority. This might seem like a harsh placement, but next up is Penny's father, Patrick Fratric Fitzgerald. On the surface, he might not seem all that bad. Sure, he's an overprotective helicopter parent, but that doesn't make him an outright villain or anything. What does make him deserving of this spot, however, is the absolutely horrific style of parenting he has. This guy had Penny hide her true self for years rather than helping her control it, and while that was mainly to protect her, he had no problem telling her point blank that she was a freak, making him ironically the biggest danger to his daughter's self-esteem. While he does make efforts to improve himself, which keeps him from falling any lower, he's definitely one of Elmore's more unsavory parents. Jumping into the next spot is Tina Rex. There's definitely some sympathy to be had for Tina, given how scared she is of her home at the junkyard and how, due to her intimidating size and temper, she has a hard time making friends. Still, sympathy can only get you such a long way when you regularly assault your classmates on a regular basis over the slightest incidents. Oh, and let's not forget that Tina tried to keep Anais's stuffed animal from her. Scared or not, that's pretty low down even for a bully. Still, I'd argue she isn't quite as dangerous as Julius, aka Bomb Kid. Julius is a more calculated and organized bully than Tina, which, let's be honest, isn't that much of a feat. His crew go beyond mere bully territory into being full-on delinquents, but he isn't all bad. In the episode The Sucker, he actually manages to work together with Darwin, and the two form an unlikely friendship. Hopefully the whole accidentally blowing his parents up thing doesn't take away from that. Seeing his way to our next spot is William. While he's ranked near the other bullies at Elmore Junior High, I'm not sure if that term quite fits William. On one wing, William is a tough character not to feel sorry for. Truly the embodiment of I have no mouth, yet I must scream. William struggles to make friends, eat, or do just about anything that can't be done via telekinesis. On the other wing, he's also the kind of guy who will literally go on a school-wide rampage to try and kill you if you cross him. And I'm sure his habits of stealing from his classmates won't help him make friends either. For the worst of Elmore Junior High's main bullies, we have Jamie. Yeah, somehow despite there being a T-Rex and a sentient explosive, Jamie is still the most concerning bully at the school by far. Similarly to Julius, Jamie is characterized as little more than a brute, and while she isn't overly malicious, she tends to hurt people constantly, seeing very little issue with that. She's mutilated pretty much every side character in the show on at least one occasion, and while it's played for laughs, feeding one of your classmates to its natural predator is a pretty villainous thing to do. She isn't pure evil, of course. Like Julius, she forms an unlikely friendship with one of the Watterson kids, but this is still one of Elmore's less savory faces, and one you'd do well to avoid on the streets. From a physical abuser to emotional ones. Next we have Nicole's parents, Daniel and Mary Sanecourt. They are the reason Nicole has the overachieving, short-tempered personality we know and love. These parents famously scolded their daughter for getting an F in gender. I'll let you guys figure out why that's ridiculous. They left Nicole with a constant sense that she wasn't doing enough, as if she had to earn their love and affection, which carried into her adult life and left her with some unresolved trauma. From not attending Nicole's wedding to refusing to apologize until Gumball sang an emotionally manipulative song to them, these two are some of Elmore's worst parents, only saved from a lower spot because they aren't outright criminals, at least not to our knowledge. The spokesperson for disgruntled background characters everywhere, Rob, is up next. After being forgotten by the people of Elmore and even left behind in the void, Rob ultimately found a purpose as the villain of Elmore, regularly threatening to destroy the town and its citizens. It's one thing to want a purpose in life, which is absolutely fine, but Ross takes it to another level, willing to genuinely endanger the lives of countless innocent people just to keep himself from being forgotten. Perhaps his most memorable scheme was in the two-part episode The Rerun, where he uses a magic remote to ruin the lives of Gumball and all of his loved ones, cementing himself as a true blue-gray villain. That said, it's possible that Ron isn't all bad. In The Inquisition, he posed as the school's superintendent in an effort to transform the students into more normal characters to save them from some kind of disaster. 5 years later, we still have no idea what that disaster is, but with any luck, we'll be seeing the return of Raj and all his buddies anytime now. When it comes to villains, the evil turtle needs no introduction. To her credit, she isn't actually that evil, she just wants to find a safe place to lay her eggs so she can protect her babies. She's still incredibly violent and impulsive, though, with an internal monologue that seems to tell her to do nothing but bite people and protect her eggs. Still, she did show some gratitude towards Gumball when the Wattersons helped to release her and her babies into the wild, so as long as they stay far, far, far away, I guess we won't have a reason to place her any lower. Elmore's most pretentious resident, Felicity Parham, is next. Even on her best day, Felicity is a total Karen who treats everything and everyone around her as beneath her. I guess her son Billy is kind of the exception to that, which is nice, or at least it would be if she weren't passing her own elitist views down to him. But if that's Felicity at her best, you can imagine that her worst is pretty bad. In The Law, when Gumball starts to jaywalk in front of her, she literally has a full-on mental breakdown and uses it as an excuse to commit every crime she can think of in the next 11 minutes. Barely missing out on the bottom 5 is Richard's own father, Frankie Watterson. Granny JoJo might have been an awful mother, but at least she was trying. No, scratch that. At least she was there. Frankie, on the other hand, abandoned his son at a pivotal age so he could live a life of conning people out of as much money as possible. Even when he feels some remorse for it later on, he still abuses his son's desire for a connection with him to try and scam him even more, from trying to trick the family into signing over the deed to their house to mooching off of them however he can. The best we could say about Frankie is that he's at least adjacent to remorseful for his actions, but he never truly makes an effort to change for the better, using his family as more of a safety net with very little hesitation. Our top 5 of evil begins with Harold Wilson, Tobias's father. While he's always been a fairly clear archetype for arrogant rich guy, Harold just needed one single episode to prove that he deserves a spot near the bottom of our list, or the top of the bad. Anyway, in the cycle, it's revealed that Harold is a longtime bully of Richard's, abusing him on a regular basis, even well into their adult years. This man has a wife, child, and mortgage, and he still prioritizes bullying his old high school classmate? That's sickening enough, but when Richard pranks him into thinking he's won the lottery, Harold doesn't even hesitate to divorce his wife and presumably abandon his son, marry a much younger woman, and still doesn't have any issue with bullying Richard. Guys like Harold have undoubtedly hurt a lot of people throughout their lives, and frankly, he's only saved from a lower spot by the fact that the remaining characters are simply worse. Barely missing out on the podium of evil is Gumball's teacher, Miss Simeon. The mean teacher archetype is nothing new to cartoons, nor was it new when Gumball made its debut, but whereas most of those teachers were just miserable people in general, Miss Simeon isn't just a bitter old lady who hates children. No, she's a bitter old lady who hates children and likes to watch them suffer. Being a sadist is one thing, and being someone who hates everything and everyone around them is another. When you combine the two, you get such a particular brand of evil that it's hard to imagine a worse person to put in charge of middle schoolers. Oh, and she isn't any nicer to younger kids either. When Nicole took her first steps, Miss Simeon, who I guess was running her daycare, immediately insulted her for them. Worst of all for Miss Simeon is that we can't even give her credit for her romance with Principal Brown. In the Inquisition, she dumped him to try and get with Superintendent Evil, presumably attracted to his affinity for psychologically abusing children, I guess. But as bad as terrorizing children is, threatening them with a spoon is even worse. Sal Left Thumb takes home our Bronze Medal of Evil for that exact reason. When a career in music didn't quite pan out, he decided the next best thing was resorting to a life of crime. Why did he decide this, you may ask? Good question. Just know that old Fingerprint Guy is a shady character who almost never shows up in any context that isn't an attempt to rob somebody. He's got plenty of bad qualities and surprisingly nothing in the way of sympathetic moments, which for a character in Gumball is actually pretty rare. The Silver Medal of Evil goes to Mrs. Robinson, and I'm sure the only thing you need me to explain here is how in the what she managed to avoid our most coveted ranking of evil. She's as bitter and hateful as Mr. Robinson, with the added bonus of being a full-on sadistic psychopath. Whether it's something as tame but still creepy as growing flowers just to cut them down, or something as truly unforgivable as allowing a child to choke to death in front of her, there is absolutely nothing good we can say about Mrs. Robinson. But, well, here's the thing. In The Wicked, where the bulk of her evil is revealed, we see that Mrs. Robinson truly has no redeeming qualities, which raises the question, is she even capable of doing good? To truly call somebody the most evil, they have to be a little more calculating, surely. Okay, fine, I just didn't want to be too predictable. But our top spot is the one character I feel I could warrant being called the worst of all. Mr. Chainex is a no-brainer for both the Gold Medal of Evil and the Greed Sinner Medal. If you've ever heard the term evil corporation, congratulations, you're up to speed on Mr. Chainex. His bread and butter is driving his employees absolutely by enslaving them with his contracts. He uses a mix of intimidation, brainwashing, incentivizing, and psychological manipulation to keep his employees working long hours for low pay. He might only have the one major appearance in The Boss, but it was more than enough for us to conclude that this guy is the antithesis of everything a show like Gumball stands for. Fun, individuality, basic human rights, none of that's important to a guy like Mr. Chainex, and as a result, he stands as a perfect foil to the social issues this show manages to satirize surprisingly well.